I should stop talking.
That's when I.
How are you, sir?
Well,
When's the last time you were out here?
glad to be here. When was the last time I was here? I was trying to think, but last fall, maybe last summer. Remember last time we met over at the library, I think the last time I was here.
It's been a while.
I feel like really important now.
Is this
Because you got a name tag?
It's like, can I bring that to work and put that on my desk too and bring it back?
Only if you staple it to your chest each time.
It's like, I'm gonna put that on my desk at work.
So this is the last meeting where people can attend virtually for no reason. Next month, they will have to appear in person unless they are quote unquote having health reasons.
Should I be here or should I be back in my office?
I was gonna ask you what your preference was. I mean, you know, it's ultimately the board if they want you here or not, but I didn't know how convenient it was for you.
I have a car and I know how to drive.
It'll be great when it's all in person again. I think these will go a lot smoother when everybody can hear each other. And
That's the thing is, you are required to be here in person. He is not.
yeah. So we should feel honored to have Tim here today.
Unless the board orders him to be here, you know,
Mhm.
in person, but
Nobody told me not to come.
yeah, so like a lot of things, you know, I think a lot of the world does not realize that you don't have to be in person every time for everything.
Mhm.
There's a lot of meetings I've had over the last year with engineers and lawyers and whatever else by Zoom.
And you probably got a lot more done doing it that way.
I'm not sure we got more done. But
Yeah.
it saved them the hassle of
Yeah.
driving an hour up here and an hour back. And
Yeah.
whatever else.
I just can't wait. You know, it's like all the planning commission members, you have to live in town. So you're within like 13 blocks of us right now. So it'll be nice when everybody just comes back in and
Yeah. Especially now that pretty much anyone who wanted to get the vaccine can or
Yep.
did get the vaccine.
we just came from Florida and I was telling them we went to Universal on Sunday and it's mask free 100% there now, which was weird. Even going in to eat, you didn't have to have a mask on.
I went to Disney twice during the pandemic and we felt safer there than we did anywhere else.
Yeah.
There was 100% masks.
Yep.
Temperature checks at all the entrances. And they were strict about it. You took your mask off or something.
yeah.
They say, put your mask back on, or you can take a walk to the, exit.
Yeah, that's when we were down for Christmas. We went to Disney Springs, just the shopping area. And it was 100% mask at all times,
Unless you're sitting still and eating.
Yeah.
Well, anyways.
That's what I was surprised on the flight back last night. A lot of times, like if you got a drink in front of you on the flight, you could have your mask down. Well, they were being very strict on the flight last night. They're like, put your mask up and down between sips. I was like, oh, that's new.
No, I didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you what. In Asia, it is kind of a cultural norm that if you're sick, that you wear a mask.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that become a cultural norm here.
Yeah.
I think that'll be a difficult sell to the American public.
Mhm.
But I didn't get a single cold last year.
No.
I know a lot of people who did.
Yeah.
And that was because people were wearing masks. So I know for a fact that moving forward, if I'm not feeling well, if I've got sniffles or something, I'm gonna wear a mask.
Yeah. Why spread it around?
Why spread it around?
It happens the same thing at work. We have 9 guys at work. One person comes in sick, doesn't tell nobody. Within 3 or 4 days, the whole shop is sick because we sit around the coffee pot in the morning. Everybody's talking, sitting at the break room table, and next thing you know, the whole shop's sick.
Well, plus you add on top of that, when I wear a mask, I don't have to fake smile anymore.
Yeah, true.
Not that I smile much to begin with.
Just have to get one of those masks. I got the smile on it.
Sure. I'm sure Rosie would give me one.
Uh-huh.
With a big red flannel on it, right?
Uh-huh.
Mike, you just gotta learn how to smile with your eyes. Watch some old Tyra Banks there
And Mr.
when she does the
Hug,
smiles. You'll be set.
dance from the peanut gallery.
Yeah, you heard me.
it's 7 o'clock and we should get started soon. So first, I just wanted to make sure everybody could hear me.
That
Can you
was
hear me?
Clinton, I believe.
Oh yeah, we got you. We can hear you, Clint.
Okay.
We really can.
Is that Clint Conley talking? Because we can't hear you.
Well, that's what I was asking. So can you still not hear me?
No, we can just barely hear you.
Let me try something different.
How about now?
Yep, that's a million times better.
Okay, just a second. I need to make some volume adjustments. Okay, am I coming through clearly now?
Yes.
Okay, so now the only issue I have is I can't hear you all that well. So let me just make an adjustment here at my place. Okay. So it's 7 o'clock or 7:01 actually now. So we should get this thing going. I think we have a quorum before I get started here. I see 1, 2, 3,
I don't know.
4. Am I missing? Oh, 5. 5. Okay. All right. Let's call the meeting to order and we'll start with the pledge.
We have it.
So if you could rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag
of the United States
of the United States
America,
of America
and to the
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In some ways, I like the Zoom meetings, but I'm not going to miss the pledge over Zoom. That's for sure. So roll call. Mr. Hall. I don't see Mr. Hall there. Have we heard from him?
I spoke with him earlier today. He did not say anything about missing the meeting, so I'm gonna call him or text him right now.
Okay. Ms. Hamill?
She emailed just before the meeting.
I have a quick appointment at 7:30, but I'm going to be listening to everything, and then I will be on Zoom the whole time.
Okay. Mr. Hoag?
Present.
Mr. Merlington?
Present.
Mr. McGrath?
Here.
Mr. Nixon? Don't see Mr. Nixon. And Mr. Conley, I'm here. So I saw that we have in the building today, we have Mr. Johnson, our city planner, and I heard Mr. Womack, so I know you're there somewhere. And the next thing is we need to approve the minutes of our last meeting on May 11th.
I'll put a move to approve the minutes.
Second that.
Second.
Any discussions or issues on the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes, signify with aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So the agenda is, or I'm sorry, the minutes are approved. The next is the approval of tonight's agenda.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, there weren't any corrections on that, were there?
I didn't see any.
Good. Glad to hear it. I spoke with Mr. Hall. He indicated he's just running a few minutes late and he'll be here shortly.
Okay. For the agenda, so do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Thank you. I'll second that. Any problems or issues with tonight's agenda, or can we approve it the way it is? Hearing nothing. All in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please signify with aye.
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 All opposed? The agenda is approved. We are now to the public comments portion of the meeting. Anyone that would like to speak to anything that's either on the agenda or not on the agenda tonight, this is your opportunity to do so. We ask for you to state your name and address if you choose, so that we could properly record who spoke. Is there anyone that would like to have any public comments tonight?
Mr. Connolly. Rose
Yes,
Powell,
hi.
Cedar Springs. Just wanted to give everybody heads up on next week, Saturday, the 12th. A real big deal for this city. Looking forward to seeing everybody. The one thing I wanted to mention is tomorrow night from 5:30 to 8:30, the CBDT is having a work bee down at the heart of Cedar Springs. We welcome one and all to come and help us spruce it up and trim some brush and pull some weeds and get it looking real fine for Saturday, the 12th. So again, tomorrow night, bring the kids, whoever, adopt a portion of that. If you want to keep it clean throughout the year, we'd certainly appreciate it. So anyway, looking forward to that work bee tomorrow night. So thank you, everybody. And I hope to see you not only tomorrow night, but Saturday, the 12th. It's pretty going to be a pretty exciting day for us all. Thank you.
Ms. Powell, you never did actually say what's occurring on the 12th.
Oh, on the 12th is the grand opening of the fire station, pardon me. The first music for the CBD sponsoring music down at the amphitheater. There's going to be sidewalk sales. There's going to be art in the heart of Cedar Springs, and just all in general, a very good time. So am I all set now, Mike?
Thank you, Ms. Powell.
Thank you. I see a hand raised from Bernadette Powell.
Hello, hi. What a beautiful day for a planning commission meeting. I appreciate everybody's time that they're taking out of this beautiful day. And thank you for being here. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in council chambers that has a comment? Hearing none. Is there anyone on the internet, on Zoom, that would like to break in at this moment? I'll take first come. Here we go. I see a Mr. Roger Morgan has a hand up.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chair. I'm here representing Rockford Ambulance, and that's on the agenda today. I live at 10585 Taft Avenue in Cortland Township. So thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. Are there any other participants on the Zoom that would like to offer a public comment before we close the public comment section? Okay, not hearing or seeing any, we will move on from public comments to number 7. Actually, before I move on, I should make note, is that Mr. Hall that I see came in?
Yes.
Okay.
I would ask the record reflect that Mr. Hall is showing up.
Thank you. So moving on to number 7, conflicts of interest and ex parte communication. This is the opportunity for planning commission members to reveal if they have any conflicts of interest or have had any ex parte communication with any of the business that's before us tonight. Hearing none, we'll move on to tonight's scheduled public hearings. There are 2 of them. The first public hearing is for a special land use of Lake Life Farms at 4116 17 Mile. The applicant seeking special land use approval for a recreational adult use marijuana retail store and a recreational marijuana processor, and this is zoned in an HC district, highway commercial. So at this time, if you have any comment regarding this use, this is your opportunity to speak to that. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised on the Zoom or hearing anyone trying to break in. So if you are, I'll give you another few seconds. And if not, then I will close this public hearing.
Mr. Conley, just for the record, one of the applicants did ask if now is an appropriate time, and I indicated he could speak now, or you would call on him during the actual discussion of his project.
Absolutely. So I would leave that up to the applicant. They can speak now if they'd like for a limited amount of time, or they can have an opportunity to speak towards it as part of our discussion later. But they will receive an opportunity during the discussion later if they so choose.
This is David Kotler. I'm the CEO of Lake Life Farms, 10350 Harvest Park in Diamonddale, Michigan, and ideally soon to be a neighbor here in Cedar Springs. I'll defer to later and try to just keep my comments brief at that time and respond to whatever's necessary.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the meeting chambers that would like to speak? I can't see everyone from my vantage, unfortunately.
I don't believe so.
And then I notice one person online labeled as Fabio has unmuted. I didn't know if that was an indication that they wanted to speak. Okay, well, not hearing any, then we will close this public hearing. And we will move on to the next public hearing. The next public hearing is for a special land use for Rockford Ambulance located at 14122 White Creek, Cedar Springs. The applicant is seeking special land use approval for an ambulance service establishment, and it is in a zoned highway commercial district. We have any public comment on the Rockford Ambulance application?
Clint, I have a comment.
Certainly.
Roger, Rose Powell, Cedar Springs. Roger, this has been a long time coming, and I'm glad that you're going to go through with it. And it's really, now that we have such a bigger population to the north of Rockford, I really appreciate you going forward with this project because it's nice to have an ambulance within 10 miles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Yeah, it's going to be our fifth or sixth substation in the area, and it has been a long time coming. We purchased the property back in 2015, and the interest rates are right, and the business climate has improved. So we're willing to move ahead if the city desires us to, and we're looking forward. We have to construction, and we have Pinnacle Construction that won the bid for this building. So thank
Mr.
you
Morgan,
very much.
Would you identify yourself, please, for the record?
I'm Roger Morgan, CEO of Rockford Ambulance, Kent County Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public in the chamber that would like to comment? Not hearing any. Are there any members of the public online or over Zoom that would like to comment? Again, not hearing any further comment. I'll close this hearing and we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is old business. Item A under old business is a special land use for adult use marijuana microbusiness located at 45 West Pine Street, doing business as Kind Buds. And we've had this before us before, and I understand there's some revisions that have been made. Mr. Johnson, should I throw this to you first, or do we have as we customarily do, or is there another way to do this?
No, that's my job to do this tonight.
Let's do this. Yeah, I don't know why I said it quite that way, but let's start with what Mr. Johnson has to say. What's changed since the last time we spoke?
Okay. Planning Commission held a public hearing on this project last month. They tabled it to direct the applicant to address deficiencies in the site plan and the application materials. They've since given us a new site plan and other materials. All those are listed in my report. In particular, they provided a survey of the property, which shows existing site conditions, a revised site plan, grading and utility plans, specifications for miscellaneous items on the plan, such as dumpster, sidewalk, that sort of thing, a new landscape plan, a floor plan. They did give us a photometric plan with no date and did not say who prepared that, so we need to get that information. And a new application book with the original submission materials and updated pages. Again, no date on that particular document. So let me start with the site plan. The revised site plan has addressed many of the items noted in my previous report, in particular the existing conditions, which really gives us a handle on what's going on there. Two items that I missed the first time through is that the parking lot is required to be curbed per our ordinance, and I'd like to see the proposed setback of the parking lot from the front lot line, which is a minor item. Regarding the lighting, the light poles are proposed to be 21 feet high. Our ordinance limits them to 20 feet, but the Planning Commission can approve a height up to 30 feet for commercial parking lots. So at some point, you would need to decide if 21 feet for the light poles are acceptable. I would note on the illumination plan that no light falls west of the parking lot, so it remains completely dark adjacent to the White Pine Trail. And on the lighting plan, I would like them to note which lights will be turned off and which would be for security. And our ordinance requires photo sensors or timers to be used to maintain that requirement. Landscaping, they show a 10-foot wide green belt with plantings and a 2-foot high berm along the trail. The number of trees and shrubs is correct, but I'd like them to make some minor corrections to the landscape calculations as noted in my report. And then also in the front facing Pine Street, they do show a hedge which meets our ordinance requirement. They've taken the initiative to provide additional trees, which is fine if they want to put those in. And I made a minor comment about proper separation between the spruce trees to give them room to grow. I also noted in my report regarding the landscaping, if they could move a couple of the trees and create landscape islands on either side of the driveway or both sides of the driveway, provides a little bit better definition for vehicles entering the site. And then there are requirements for how big those landscaping islands need to be. Our ordinance also requires that any trees that are to be maintained on the site, they should provide a barrier to protect the trees at the drip line. They would need to show that on the site plan. And I would note that they are going to provide an underground irrigation system as required by our ordinance. They do provide a waste disposal plan, and it's properly noted on the plan in terms of the materials and the location. Our ordinance says it really shouldn't face the road. This does directly face the driveway when you pull in, but it's over 230 feet away from Pine Street. I made a small note that if they wanted to move that at an angle closer to the building, then it wouldn't directly face the driveway and it'd make it easier for waste hauler trucks to maneuver on the site. They provided us on the facade, it's a concrete block exterior and white color. I think on page 76 of your packet, it shows a colored rendering of that building. And you would need to weigh in on whether that meets the materials and design of our ordinance. They do note on the building that they're going to put a mural on the side of the building facing the White Pine Trail. Unfortunately, murals are only allowed in the B2 zone. They are in the B3 zone, so we'll have to take that note off the site plan. They have provided a pre-qualification letter, which they did not have last month. That's included in your packet. The plan has been provided to our city engineer. I don't believe we received his report as of May 24th. Maybe we have now. Updated information on the customer plan has been provided and is acceptable. So I've also given you kind of a rundown, as I always do, on the special land use standards. Again, you have the discretion to approve this, deny it, or approve it with conditions. It does not go on to the city council. So things you want to look at is, does it meet the intended or projected character of the area? And I would note that the character of the adjacent land uses are both commercial and residential across Pine Street But those houses are zoned and planned for commercial use. So over time, the character will become all commercial. Commissioners, you should discuss whether this is appropriate next to the White Pine Trail, particularly in light of our efforts to create a White Pine Trail overlay zone to provide businesses along the trail. Arguably, marijuana infused products could meet the definition of support services or products for people that use the trail. But once the greenbelt is up and maturing, I think most of the time, most of the year, the building may not even be visible from the White Pine Trail. Other than that, I think the project meets the remaining items or criteria for special land uses. So I've given you a motion to approve or to deny it with conditions that you need to go over following my remarks. And at this point in time, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members of the Planning Commission for Mr. Johnson before we move on to the applicants?
Can I ask about the 21-foot height? This is just more of a future reference thing. Is there just a max of 20 feet? Is that why the 21 feet is the issue?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is anyone here to represent the applicant tonight? Or the applicant themselves?
We do have people. Who'd like to-
I didn't know if they wanted to have an opportunity to respond to what Mr. Johnson has said, or to present themselves for questions if any of the commissioners have questions. I guess they're not required to. I just was curious.
Mr. Conley, while they're sorting themselves out and trying to figure out who wants to speak on behalf of their project, I do have two real quick comments.
Certainly.
So unfortunately, I was on vacation when this all came in, so I didn't get a chance to do my full report like I'd like to do. But in reviewing Mr. Johnson's report, I had two comments, one of which is regarding the mural. While I agree that it should be removed off the site plan because that's not really something that you put on a site plan, I'm not entirely sure that they're prohibited outside of the B2 district. My reading of the sign ordinance or the zoning ordinance indicated that in the B2 district, they're generally exempt if they're under 12 square feet. But I'm not sure that that prohibits them outside of the district. And then secondly, I noticed similarly on the west side of this building, there is no lighting being provided, but there are two exit doors. And I think it's appropriate to require there at least be emergency lighting over those two rear doors. I believe the state's going to require that there be cameras on those two doors anyways. So they should have some lighting there to assist the cameras. But those are my only two comments.
Okay.
I don't,
Is
all of the,
Identify yourself.
oh, I'm Dallas Van Belcom. Thank you for your time tonight. Mr. Johnson, your comments here, I don't have any specific rebuttals to them or arguments, but anything that you said in your report, we are willing to work with you guys on changing it, whether it be landscaping or light pole height or whatever. And I also did want to say that I do have a report here from Fishback, I forget his last name, Neil.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought he sent it to you as well. I can forward that to you if I need to. There were some minor comments on there.
Generally, site plan approval just says must be approved by the city engineer.
Okay.
So they're kind of a separate thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, other than that, I did want to say that we did write letters to the residents that got notified originally. I forget, what is it, 300 feet away from the property, inviting them to a community get together at the library. And we had one person show up who lives directly across from the property. I don't want to say her name, but she was very supportive of the business and actually wants to apply for a job with us. Other than that, no one else can. So, which that would be awesome if we could hire some local people if this did go through. So that would be a huge goal of ours. Other than that, happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you. Planning Commission, do you have any questions or comments for before we move on?
I have a quick question.
Yes, Ms. Hamel?
I just wanted to know what the applicant's reason was for the 21-foot light. I just would be curious to know if there's like a specific reason they wanted that one, or because I saw that they had replied in the packet and just said that they would be willing to switch them to the 20-foot one. But before we do that, if there's a specific reason why they wanted the 21-foot one, I would like to know what that.
This is Dallas again, and I don't really have a great answer for that. Part of it was I didn't realize that the engineers and architects that we hired weren't including that in their plan, so it was kind of a rush piece there, and it was 21 feet is what the lighting engineer came up with. But again, happy to change that if needed.
Okay, thank you.
That actually brings up another point for me, and I might direct this to Mr. Johnson. So it looks to me like there's already issues that need to be corrected on the lighting plan. So that could either, I mean, once we start changing the height of light poles, if that's what we do, doesn't that change the number of foot candles on the ground and require another lighting plan?
Maybe. I'm not enough of a lighting expert to say whether if you reduce it by 1 foot, lower by 1 foot, how much that is actually going to change the amount of illumination. I don't think it's going to be any kind of approach to violation of our zoning code in terms of light trespass or maximum foot candles. I don't think it will affect that at all. I think
Okay.
the only thing I pointed out was that the barrier-free spaces do have to have at least 3 foot candles, and according to the photometric plan they provided, the barrier-free spaces do not. So there will have to be some adjustment in the lighting plan. But typically, the commission has forwarded that to the zoning administrator for final approval.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
what about the security lighting around the exit doors in the rear? I find that the site itself, I believe under state law with the licensing, they have to have security lighting all the way around.
I can chip in on that a little bit. The cameras are actually, they have infrared capabilities, so we don't actually need lights to get
Yes, okay.
state required picture quality. But we would be open to adding lights out there. That would.
Just it didn't say in the plan that they were night vision type. I didn't read that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
they are. Yep.
I think a lot can be said though about motion sensors scaring off potential break-ins as well.
True.
Mr. McGrath, I see you had a question.
This is a question for Mr. Johnson. You mentioned the White Pine Trail overlay. I'm just wondering how would this affect that and any future development along the overlay? If you could speak to that.
Right. The White Pine Trail overlay zone doesn't go this far north. I think it stops at either Cherry or Elm Street. So I guess in terms of our ordinance that we talked about last month, it would not affect this particular site. I put that in my report simply as kind of a reminder that we are looking at doing some regulations or opening a business along the White Pine Trail. And arguably you could say, well, this does support a business along the White Pine Trail, or some may say it does not.
Mr. Johnson, would it be a fair statement to say that the White Pine overlay zone is promoting commercial and retail uses in the industrial buildings that currently exist in the downtown? Would that be a fair statement?
That is an accurate and fair statement.
So this area is already zone B3, which is already a commercial and retail type area. So I get what you're getting at, but I think the overlay zone is more, so, this board rezoned a substantial portion of the area surrounding the White Pine Trail from the Carmen Aventini era of the mixed use red zone on the map back to what it actually is, which is industrial. But the White Pine Trail overlay zone is basically saying, okay, it's industrial, but commercial would be okay too.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the planning commission or for either the applicant or anyone about any other subject?
I did have one question for Mr. Johnson. On your report, you talked about for the landscaping plan, about the green belt, something about being 200 and, I believe it was, I don't have it in front of me, 220 feet and extending it to 278 feet, I think it was.
It had to do with it was my measurement versus whoever prepared the plan. I measured the distance and it was different than what the engineer has.
Oh, okay, so it wasn't saying extended or anything?
No, it was
Okay,
just a
gotcha.
matter of, if I can be proven wrong, then keep it the way it is. But
Okay.
It's just a matter of the right information on the plan.
Gotcha. That's the only question I had.
Okay.
Okay. If there's no further questions, I'll stop in case there is, but if there's no further questions, it seems to be we had a couple issues left on the board. So we have all of the things that Mr. Johnson has addressed regarding landscaping, lighting, things that we could conditionally approve if we chose to, or we could decide not to because we need to see more. That's pretty standard. And then there's the other issue of whether or not we think this is an approvable special use in that location.
Mr. Conley,
So-
the record reflect that Mr. Nixon has appeared.
Thank you. So I guess both of these issues are on the table. Which do we have any comment or questions or just anything, any direction from the Plan Commission as to how we want to tackle this first?
Well, I guess the comment that I would say, I mean, I've gone over this packet for the last day. I believe it's it's a very well-prepared packet. I think the things that Mr. Johnson are speaking about, we've dealt with these on a couple of the last ones and we've passed them along to the zoning enforcement, to make sure those changes were made. I believe this could be approved and let the city council or the city manager make sure those changes have been made.
Okay. Well, I guess we have a couple ways we can move forward with this. We can take a motion. We have a motion from that Mr. Johnson has provided for us, and we can modify that motion as needed and make the motion and then discuss as needed. Or another motion could be entertained. I'll leave that up to the preference of the Planning Commission or whoever gets to it first.
I would
Okay.
make I guess
Go ahead.
if you're asking, I would make a motion to approve it pending that the things are fixed that Mr. Johnson has spoke about.
So if, just to clarify, would you be willing to go through the motion that Mr. Johnson has provided? And there's several qualifiers in there and just make a determination on each of the places where we have to say approve or deny or whatever along the way as to what you want the motion to say?
Sure.
Meaning I will walk you through it if that's because I have it in front of me, but it's your motion. So that's why I wanted to clarify.
Yes,
with you.
yeah. If you want to walk me through that, yeah, I think that would be a quick way to do it.
Okay, so the motion that we have in front of us, we have the option to move to approve or deny, and it sounds like you said that you want to approve.
Correct.
Move to approve the request from 45 West Pine Street as stated in Mr. Johnson's sample motion. Further down on this, we have the option to say as the updated application materials and illustrated on the site plan set meet or do not meet. I assume you'd want that to say meet.
Yes.
The special land use approvals standards contained in section 4571 of zoning ordinance. And then moving forward through this, so I don't read every single moment or every single word on here. There are a couple other places. Number one, there's some language about approval is granted based on a compliance with the plans that are detailed, that Mr. Johnson has detailed. Number two is that the plans and condition be revised to comply with items 1B, 2A, 2C, 2D, 3A to 3D, and 5B that Mr. Johnson just laid out in his report. With the light poles are or are not approved for a height of 21 feet. What's your pleasure on that?
I would say they are approved because when I read in the packet, Mr. Johnson said we could approve light pole height up to 9 feet higher than that. So I think we could just approve the 21-foot light pole.
So for number three, light poles are approved.
Yes.
And then for the building facade is or is it not acceptable?
From what I've seen, I believe it is. If some of the other guys or girls on the planning commission want to comment on the facade, I think it's a very nice looking building.
Okay, so for your motion, you would say that the building facade is acceptable.
Yes.
And then number 5 through 11 are there are no conditional aspects in there. These are the same that we do for pretty much any business of this type. So those would remain the same as Mr. Johnson put them in the sample resolution or sample motion.
Yes.
So clarify, that's the motion that you have on the table?
That is the motion I have on the table.
Thank you. Does that have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Okay, so now that we have a motion on the table, it's time for discussion. Is there anything in there that is that we need to discuss one way or the other? I'm not hearing a lot of discussion, although there is one thing we did not add, or we did not in this motion consider. I'm not sure if the question of the lighting on the exterior doors, if that's been resolved one way or the other.
Exterior lighting on the rear exit doors.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Hall, I couldn't hear exactly what you said, but do we?
Is that the discussion on the lighting on the rear exterior doors?
Yeah, that was just had involving the infrared.
Yeah.
I don't know if we addressed that in the motion the way we presented it, or have we?
I think it was not, but that would be Mr. Johnson's decision.
Mr. Merlington, would you amend your motion to make the lighting and photometric plans subject to final approval by the zoning administrator?
Yes, I would.
Ms. Hamel, would you second that amendment?
Yes, seconded.
And may I add one more thing?
Certainly.
Item 8, change, it should read micro business rather than retailer establishment and marijuana processor. A bad cut and paste job there.
Well, now you go improving that you're actually fallible one in rare occurrences, Mr. Johnson. But thank you.
Hey, you haven't talked to my wife lately.
Do you approve of that amendment, Mr. Merlington?
Yes.
And Ms. Hamel, do you continue to second with the amendment?
Yes, seconded.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor then as of the motion as is on the table, please signify with aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion passes. And I think that takes us on to new business. So for new business, we're under item 10A, and forgive me, I'd like to tell the planning commissioner where we are in the packet in case they, and I forgot to do that earlier. This would be 112 in your packet, page 112. 10A is a site plan review for JFJ Cedar Springs Properties LLC retail project at 4186 17 Mile Road. And I guess I will send this one to Mr. Johnson again to help us understand what's happening here.
Okay, this is a site plan review only, and this would be the planning commission's responsibility to approve this or deny it or approve it with conditions. The applicant in this case wishes to create a 0.58 acre parcel that's in Solon Township at the south end of the property at 4116 17 Mile Road, which is also the building or the property that's coming up on our agenda for the Lake Life Farms marijuana establishment. As part of that property split they would like to create, they're going to construct a 2,400 square foot building with 13 parking spaces served by water and sewer with an easement through the retail parking lot from 17 Mile Road to reach this property. So again, it's just simply site plan review. As part of the project, they also will be applying to be annexed into the city via the 425 agreement with Solon Township. And we are reviewing this project according to the Highway Commercial Zoning District regulations of our zoning ordinance. So you have, this project is somewhat tied to the Lake Life Farms project. And if you have those two site plans, I'll try to walk you through why it's kind of joined together here. That the Lake Life Farms retail and processor project that's on our agenda next. Moving into that building, the property as it sits abuts a parcel in Solon Township that has a single family house on it. And our marijuana requirements do not allow a marijuana establishment to be located next to a parcel that has a single family house on it. So the Lake Life Farms project is not approvable, but for the fact that the JFJ lot split, if it is enacted and the lot split comes to pass and it's all approved, that site or that property will be in between the Lake Life Farms marijuana establishment property and the single family house. And if that's all approved for JFJ, then the planning commission can approve the Lake Life Farms marijuana establishment. Is that absolutely clear to everybody?
I think so.
Okay, if you had some drawings up in front of you, it would be easier to see, but that's the reason they're kind of tied together. But for our purposes, for the site plan, we are simply looking at that particular site plan. But keeping in mind that the traffic to reach this new property split will have to go through the Lake Life Farms retail building parking lot. So you have to keep that in mind as well. And we'll talk about that traffic going through when we get to the Lake Life Farms project. So going back to the site plan for this project, on page 2 of my report, the site plan shows there's no parking lot light poles. They will only have building wall lights. We would ask them to provide cut sheets of the wall lights to verify they meet the requirements of our ordinance and that the barrier-free parking spots have a minimum illumination of 3 foot candles. Also, the city fire chief should review the plan to determine the need for a fire hydrant back there on this property. And if they have proper access for their fire trucks to reach that property. I think that's a very important consideration for this particular use. We'd like them to show the height of the building. The parking, because they have not expressed a user for this property, they have just come up with the parking formula for general retail, which is acceptable for our current review process. At the time that a user is brought forth, if that user requires more parking spaces based on the formula for that particular use, they will have to provide more parking in order to meet our ordinance and before an occupancy permit can be issued. One other thing that I would bring up regarding parking, and I'm going to kind of go back and forth between the Lake Life Farms project and this project, is that on the site plan for this project, the lot split and the commercial building, they show on the site plan a different parking arrangement on the Lake Life Farms property. They are shifting some parking around at the southern end of the building. They're putting parking next to the building on the Lake Life parking lot. I didn't catch that when I first reviewed that, but in looking at it in preparation for tonight's meeting, I couldn't figure out the difference, but now I understand they're providing more parking on the Lake Life Farms project and shifting the parking around, I think, to provide room for the easement. But we're not looking at the Lake Life Farms site plan right now. We're looking at this site plan. So when I get to that, we'll have to talk about revising the Lake Life Farms site plan to illustrate what the JFJ site plan shows for the parking arrangement. So if you put those two site plans next to each other, you can understand what I'm telling you. But so proceeding, they provide us a building facade. It's masonry block, which is one of the acceptable building exteriors. It would be nice if they showed us the color, and I've asked them to do that. Our city engineers provided a letter recommending conditional approval, and the site plan meets all the other requirements of our zoning ordinance. So in addition to reviewing the site plan, one thing that is particular with this project is that it doesn't have any frontage on a public or private street. And typically we do not allow that to be a lot to be created. But in this case, we adopted to our zoning ordinance a couple of years ago, provision that allows the planning commission to approve a lot without public or private street frontage if that project comes in for site plan review, which this project is doing. So you have the ability to approve this creation of this lot without public or private street frontage if it meets the criteria of that section of the ordinance. And I put that in my staff report, and I'm going to go through that briefly so you can see what those criteria are. So the first criteria is that they have to have a recorded easement to get back out to 17 Mile Road, and they intend to provide that easement. That would be a condition of site plan approval. The second criteria is whether the proposed access to the lot will be sufficiently constructed and located so as to be capable of safely accommodating projected vehicle traffic to and from the lot, as well as safely accommodating emergency vehicles. I think given the size of the building, 2,400 square feet, 13 parking spaces, I don't think it's going to generate a lot of traffic. But I think, again, the fire chief needs to look at that to make sure they can get their fire truck back there or whatever vehicle in a timely fashion before this project can be approved. One other thing, again, that I pointed out here is that if I'm going to be driving through the parking lot, existing parking lot, to reach this proposed lot split, I'm not looking for a place to park, and I might be going slow. I need to get from point A to point B. So once I leave 17 Mile Road and head back to this site, I may be going just a little bit faster through the parking lot to get there. And the same thing when I leave. So that, again, that's on the other site plan for Lake Life Farms. But I think it's fair to address that as part of this particular review project. No variances are needed, which is one of the criteria. They meet the requirements of the HC zone. And then the other items that are considered criteria, I believe they meet that. One of the last one is that you need to set the north lot line as the front lot line in order to determine setbacks. And they have provided that. And I think that would be my recommendation as well. So the lot creation of this lot would satisfy all of the above criteria, perhaps except for number 2 in the criteria. I think I put 4 in there, but it's actually 2. So those need to be discussed, as well as some of the site plan items that I've noted in my report that are deficient. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back over to you and see if commissioners have any questions.
I have a question to start with. Going back to the facade, I don't see in my plans any elevations. So, and that could just be a clerical thing. I'm not sure. But according to what you said in here, there were elevations that showed what the building looked like.
Correct.
Okay. I'm asking the other commissioners here, am I wrong in not noticing those, or have you all seen them and I'm just confused?
I'm scrolling down, looking for them.
I'm with you. I've been scrolling and I didn't see them. I would look for them earlier when I first opened this too.
Okay, because that would help me a lot, because I admit I was going to come into this meeting asking this question. I was confused if we were actually approving a building, but I didn't see any details on the building itself. So, Mr. Womack, can you shine a light on that, or?
Yeah, generally whatever is given to me on electronically or on the flash drive is what makes it onto your agenda. So it's possible that I just never got it myself. I'll go back and take a look, but
I received a paper copy, and
I hate to admit it, being, as young as I am, but I generally don't look at the paper copies. So whatever is available to me electronically, and I just happen to be on vacation when this one was put together. So I apologize if the board did not see the elevations, but for what it's worth, if I have a few seconds for comment.
Sure.
I agree with Mr. Johnson. There are some deficiencies that I think prevent this project from being approved tonight. In particular would be the fire department's approval and the whether they want to have a fire plug or widen the driveway or some rear access or something like that. I guess the board could approve subject to, but I think with the other things that Mr. Johnson has identified, we might want to bring this back next month for approval. But I do think it's important that the board at least discuss whether this is an approvable project in light of the easement requirements that it needs to be approved. Because otherwise the other project, as Mr. Johnson also elucidated, is not approvable. So my recommendation would be to table, but with discussion about whether the board thinks it will eventually be approved.
Okay. I have to admit, I would like to be able to see the building before I approve something I haven't seen. Any other comments or questions from the planning commission before we go one way or
Mr.
the other on
Chair?
this? Yes.
I would move to table this until such time further information is acquired for it to be brought back to us.
I would second that.
Okay.
I would say that I do think it is approvable in the future, but I would like to see more detail on the site plan that we don't have, and get some more feedback.
I would like to see what proposed businesses would be in there myself, but not required.
Yeah, I think it could be approvable. I don't have a philosophical issue with the easement.
Too many unknowns.
I'm sorry. Yeah, but there's too many unknowns. I don't have a philosophical issue with the easement, as long as a clear path of traffic that's accessible for emergency vehicles, and just in general that there's not going to be a bottleneck moving all of those vehicles through that parking lot. It's not the widest parking lot up there on the other portion of the property, and that's the only access in. So I have some questions about that. But beyond that, if it's deemed that that works, I think it could be approvable.
Yes.
I agree.
And I suspect that we're going to continue talking about this then in the next one, but I suppose we should close discussion on this unless there's any other items or any other items of discussion you'd like to add to this. Okay, all in favor of tabling this until the next meeting, please signify with aye.
Mr. Conley.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Which merely moves us to a different facet of what seems to be a combined issue here. Moves us on to item B. Site plan review and special land use of Lake Life Farms for a recreational adult use marijuana retail store and a recreational adult use marijuana processor at 4116 17 Mile Cedar Springs. So I guess I will give the floor back to you, Mr. Johnson, and we'll tie this all back together.
Okay, excuse me, let me walk you through this report. Excuse me. This is formerly the White Pine Provisioning Project. The applicants for that particular project, which was a retailer and grower, have withdrawn or decided not to proceed with their project. And in its place, Lake Life Farms have applied for a adult use of marijuana retail and processor. They provided us a site plan. The site plan shows that the area to be occupied within the building is much smaller than the White Pine Provisioning Center was. White Pine was going to occupy 12,663 square feet, and the Lake Life Farms will occupy only 3,425 square feet. So it's quite a bit smaller. As you are aware, with White Pine Provisioning, this project also does not meet that particular section of our zoning ordinance that does not allow a marijuana establishment to abut a parcel with a single family dwelling. So the Lake Life Farms requests cannot be approved until that particular requirement is met. And it can be met in a variety of different ways, but as we just discussed, the JFJ project was to create a new parcel. So that new parcel would be in between the Lake Life Farms parcel and the single family dwelling parcel, which is in Solon Township. And the Planning Commission just tabled that project. So getting ahead of myself, that this particular project, Lake Life Farms, cannot be approved unless there's some condition that that section of the ordinance is met before it can be approved, Lake Life Farms. The rest of my report gets into the sketch plan. The sketch plan is fairly well put together. They provided a couple pieces of information that were not on the White Pine Provisioning site plan. It's basically the same site plan that you looked at back in February. This site plan labels the doors on the east side of the building and notes that those will be used for marijuana deliveries and receiving. The area is smaller within the building, and Lake Life Farms will have a pickup window that's been added to the site plan. Some things I'd like to see on the plan corrected to relocate a barrier-free parking space so it's adjacent to the front door. For White Pine Provisioning, the door was located further to the north. Now it's further to the south, so that barrier-free parking space should be located closer to that particular door. Regarding the parking requirements, my calculations show that they need a total of 93 parking spaces for this use and the other uses that are existing in the building. Only 88 are provided, however, but I think that the parking would be sufficient for Lake Life Farms when they move in there, and when the vacant retail space may or may not be able to meet the particular parking spaces. But I would say it's not particularly fair to not allow Lake Life Farms when there is sufficient parking on the site to meet their needs. But again, going back to the JFJ plan, that plan showed additional parking spaces being provided on that plan, but not the Lake Life Farms plan. So those the whole project, the whole property is owned by the same owner. And so their site plans should fit together, which is another reason to table both of these until they can get their site plan act together on the parking. The access easement needs to be shown on this plan. Again, the fire chief needs to look at that. They want to repair the existing underground irrigation system as White Pine Provisioning did. That is required by our ordinance. Lighting, we recommend that a lighting plan be submitted to the zoning administrator for final approval. And then the waste container, they're going to paint the existing wooden fence, which encloses the dumpster, which meets our ordinance. And then the facade is not changing as it did not under White Pine Provisioning, and the planning commission approved that at the time. They are going to provide a sidewalk along 17 Mile Road with an easement to be provided to the city for that portion that's outside the right of way. The city engineer would need to take a look at the stormwater management issues. And the driveway plan, the driveway notes that it will be subject to the requirements of the Kent County Road Commission. They have provided a pre-qualification letter, and they meet the requirements for a processor and retailer, except for the fact that they're next to a property that contains a single family dwelling, which means it does not meet all of the requirements for a marijuana processor and retailer. Some other information in my report we'd like to see regarding the marijuana delivery plan. I did not see an ADA plan, but I may have missed that given the amount of material that they provided. I had a question about transporting the marijuana, unusable marijuana plant material off the site, which I'd like them to answer. Negative air pressure will be maintained within the building. The blight elimination plan is the same as proposed by White Pine Provisioning. And then some other information on how the pickup window will operate, and then floor plan and other items, just some typos and just some additional information to label there. So I've pretty much given you the same analysis under the special land use permit as we had for White Pine Provisioning. I've given you two motions, one to basically table it and then to approve it subject to conditions. But again, I think there's too many unanswered questions here when it's trying to be coordinated with the JFJ site plan to go ahead and approve this. But at least you can give some feedback to the applicant who is in the room tonight to answer your questions. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Womack, I've skipped over you a couple times and you haven't let me, so I'm going to give you a chance before I do that again.
I agree with Mr. Johnson's report. It was very thorough. I think if applicant were to fix the issues that were addressed in his report, this project would probably be approvable at the next meeting. But I do really want to hear from the applicant about the delivery window that appears to be presented on their plan. And I think the planning commission should discuss whether they think that is an approvable aspect of the plan, just because it seems a little out of the ordinary. And I just want to know if that's something, because I don't know if that's addressed anywhere within our ordinances. A drive-through would require special land use approval. And so I don't know if you want to think of this similar to a drive-through, or if it's just something we don't want to have in the city, because I think this would be the first one that's being proposed for the city. Other than that, I agree with Mr. Johnson. It probably needs to be fixed and brought back at the next meeting.
Okay, is the applicant available tonight for those questions?
Yeah.
I am, once again, David Kotler on behalf of Lake Life Farms, 10350 Diamonddale, Michigan 48821. I'll try to take a couple of these issues one by one and then answer any additional questions. I mean, look, as pointed out, we live and die by what happens in regard to our property owners' actions in the other parcel adjacent. Let me first say that what I'd respectfully request the planning commission consider is, honestly, for your own purposes, granting this conditioned upon that being approved. It saves you one less thing to consider in the future. But with that said, in terms of, I think, Mr. Johnson's question on the waste disposal plan, In the processing that we plan on doing, which is a solventless process, meaning it doesn't involve CO2, butane, these type of things, and doesn't have plant material coming into the building, there really is no byproduct that's going to be made and need to be disposed of. I think secondarily on the retail side of things, I can tell you that that is a process by which we mirror in Big Rapids, which is our other retail location in Michigan. And it sounds a little silly, but 9 out of 10 retail operators are doing this. And frankly, a number of cultivations are doing this. It's mixed with another type of waste, generally in this setting, kitty litter, to the point where it reaches an unusable mass. I can also tell you from personal experience that in Big Rapids, we've had that bucket sitting in the back room for 7 months and it has yet to be disposed of. So that gives you a sense of how much is actually being wasted. We have expired products. Usually those are we call it pennied out and dealt with to internally staff or returned to a manufacturer. So you don't, in the retail setting, you don't see it as much. So I wanted to answer that in regard to waste disposal. I think there was also a question in terms of delivery, in particular between the two units, which there would be. Ideally, there's some processing and packaging of whether it's a gummy or other edible material out of the quote unquote the kitchen. And that process would look something as permitted by Lara. Somebody would open the back door after looking at the camera and making sure no one's there. They'd look to the left, they'd look to the right, they'd scoot around to the side, and in they'd go to the retail and deliver it. That happens by recording it in metric. So that is, it's a little, I make jest of it, but essentially it's a recorded transaction. It's allowed to take place. We're also co-located in Dimondale. It's interior, so we have interior doors that allow us to do that, whereas this would be exterior because these units are adjacent but not connected. So a little different, but it would be a process that's logged in the metric or through a third-party integrator, and then literally walked over from time to time when necessary. And then it's received in inventory and then logged in the metric. But there is a physical aspect of somebody that's going to walk it over. I guess last, but maybe not least, I think there's a few other issues to address, probably the other elephant in the room, which is the delivery window. It's not, drive up is not currently permitted in the state of Michigan, although it will be. Apparently, I've heard some birdies chirping in that regard. That is not the intent of this, obviously, because it's not permitted. I personally have had discussions with both BFS as the first point of contact who said, Bureau of Fire Services, it's not a Bureau of Fire Services issue. Talk to Lara Enforcement. They're looking at it. As long as it's not drive-through, that's out of the way. And I have not gotten a definitive answer. I mean, if the commission said you can't do it, look, I'm not going to lose any sleep. I personally think it's a more effective means. It looks very similar to what one does at CVS and Walgreens. And if it's a safe way for somebody to be able to address their medicine, although this is an adult use facility, we think to some level customers should have the same access. It actually, I know there's an importance to customer flow. And when we find that express pickups may be served better by having that type of window, which operates just like the CVS mechanism. I mean, it's a commercially sold mechanism, that it will improve customer flow because you're not now forcing and channeling people into a separate interior express window or booth. By way of example, in Big Rapids, patrons walk through a front door, they're checked in, they go through a second door, and then they go to an express counter there. That's a process that brings more people in the door, creates more clutter, more opportunity for who knows what. And this was an attempt to cut down on that and allow for those that want to do express ordering to do so from the safety of their home, vehicle, or other place, and have an expedited method by which to pick up. For what it's worth, it's something we've considered and feel that it's actually potentially a safer way to do business, a more expedient way, and will increase the inflow and exflow, if those are words of our customers. But if it's something that the commission feels differently, we'll live with the commission's or the decision on that. Or can talk about it and provide more information if necessary.
I'm sorry, could I interrupt for just a moment? Because I have a question about
Absolutely.
that delivery window. And I'm trying to envision, and I'm a pharmacy technician myself, so I'm trying to think of the CVS example that you're using, and I'm having trouble picturing it. So,
Mr. Conley, to add on to
Yes.
that, maybe we could ask applicant to provide pictures and or an actual location that actually is occurring with the same model that they're proposing.
that's kind of where I was going towards. Yes, thank you for helping me find the words. Sometimes they're not there. That's if there was a way that I could see this more clearly, because I'm trying to imagine what you're saying, and I'm unfortunately not able to do so.
Sure. You mind if I try to articulate it a little bit?
Sure.
I can't tell you that in the state of Michigan, because I've not done a survey, that anybody else is using this method. It's frankly something, and we get to be innovators at times and do things better than those that came before us. And that's really what we're looking to do, especially with the advent of curbside and our employees having to walk out onto a street in 10-degree weather. So this is a means by which to fix that issue. But essentially, let me kind of explain what would happen. The very front of the retail space, I don't know if you have the architect sketch in front of you. And if you do, the front part of the retail space, imagine is a separate rectangle. In that separate front rectangle sits a receptionist who looks out towards the waiting area where a patron would enter the front door. But in that rectangle where the receptionist sits is enough room to bring pre-orders up and essentially have those pre-orders in a locked cabinet, so that when somebody arrives for their order, that window exists as if when the pharmacy tech interacts usually with a drive-through customer. Instead, it would be a standing customer, and the receptionist could turn to that, take a license, accept cash or other means of payment, and then hand the bag, or push through the bag containing one person's product, all from the front of that of where the receptionist sits, which is on the front of the building of the retail area. Hope that helps. I'm not sure I'm the best.
Okay.
Is this more geared to a walk-up delivery or drive up?
Walk up. The way that the building is set up, somebody would have to exit their car
Yes.
and then walk up, obtain whatever it is, and then get back in their car and leave.
When you say drive-up delivery, that tells us that you're looking for a drive-through.
Not looking for a drive-through. It's not permitted.
Okay.
Okay,
walk
that's what
up,
I was
walk
thinking
up.
too.
Listen, it would be great, but the state doesn't allow it. So that is not our intent. This is one where somebody would have to park their car, exit and walk up and be underneath the canopy. So there is an overhang, ideally out of the elements. It would expedite express pickup. I think it really facilitates that.
Mr. Cutler, looking at your site plan here, this looks like the window is fronting kind of along the main parking area, the front of the building.
189 is the page.
Now, I would imagine the planning commission members might be thinking to themselves that the entire, I guess, commercial side of that building could then see that. Is it something that could possibly be shifted to I believe that's the south side of the building there, so that it would be outside of the normal, I guess, parking area? I think that would only really want customers at that location.
Absolutely no problem with that. My only concern in doing that is sitting here as a former prosecutor is whether that would be a danger at certain times of night. Now it's lit well, cameras are there, but putting that aside for half a second, just to play devil's advocate. No, we'd move it in a second. That would be fine, and do it in a way that we'd make sure there's no safety issue. We have the ability to do it because it also has, windows are on the front and windows are on the side. So it's half a dozen, 1/6 of another.
Just presenting an option for the planning commission members.
I'll take it and I appreciate it. So I'll get it. So essentially, I think if there's any other questions, I can go through them a little bit. The only thing that I would suggest, and I know that there's a desire to table both of these matters because we for better or for worse, go hand in hand, would be if there is a comfort level, I would just, again, respectfully request the commission consider granting this particular application conditional upon the future granting. And essentially, all that with the conditions suggested by Mr. Johnson, what that does is it saves the commission having to have me come back and do this process over. Frankly, if the adjoining property is not approved, I go bye-bye and maybe we look for other property. Maybe we go to the next town. Hopefully, I'd like to stay here. It's a beautiful city. But it really, from an economy of scale, it makes sense for the commission and at least give us some direction. And then worst case scenario, they don't get approved. This doesn't move forward. Best case scenario, whether it's a month or 2 months from now, they do what they need to do. They get approved and we spring into action and can move forward. I can tell you just 2 other issues, not to belabor the point, that were addressed were the sprinkler aspect and the parking curbs. It's not our dog in the fight because the landlord's paying for it. I will mention, though, that I do know 2 things that I think the commission should be aware of in that regard. And the new property owners have done a nice job. I know they have already scheduled an install for new parking lot, paving and other things. And so the only thing I would bring to the commission's attention is putting the curbs as a requirement may work a hardship on the landlord. Again, not my issue. And secondarily, I do know that they've undertaken landscaping improvements and have hired a landscaper. And so I don't know how exactly that plays into the irrigation aspect, but I'll only mention it that they are already in the process of improving and making sure that all the landscaping is alive. I can't speak personally as to whether there's existing irrigation systems that either need to be repaired, installed, or otherwise, but I know that they've gotten ahead of the curve in taking those actions. But I can answer any other questions that give anybody a measure of comfort on this particular application.
Planning Commission, it's Mr. Nixon.
With the walk-up window that you are proposing, would you also be proposing bullet-resistant glass, kind of like at a bank?
I haven't seen the full specs on it, although I've asked the builder for them. I can tell you the glass that's surrounding it, because there is a already existing glass facade that was approved as part of the White Provisioning Center. So if you ask me normally, I'd say yes. However, it's a pretty big expense only for somebody to shoot from the side. I'm not sure we're accomplishing our mission. So in a perfect world, I would do it that way, but I think I don't know that it's necessary because you're not going to accomplish much by it.
I think he might also be asking purely from an aesthetic point of view, because that's actually one of the things that I was concerned about with this proposal is, and I'm not sure everybody's been to Detroit, but in Detroit, bulletproof and rotating, separations and all that, that is a very common occurrence in party stores, gas stations, etc. And it looks poor, it looks bad, it looks dangerous, and it's not a look I think we want here in this community. So that might be, Mr. Nixon, what he was asking. So right. I get what you're saying regarding shoot from the side, but that might be what his question was.
I get it. And I apologize for kind of taking it maybe in the wrong vein. I can listen. Here's what we're not going to be. We're not going to be green crosses. We're not going to be bright colors. We're not going to be neon. You haven't had the benefit of seeing, and maybe I should have brought some pictures of what we've done in Big Rapids. If it looks crappy, we're not putting it up. And so that may not mean much to you. And it's not something you can put on a condition that Mr. Kotler said, conditioned on it not looking crappy. But it is something we think about because at the end of the day, we want to be a good neighbor and it needs to look good. So I'm not sure how to kind of move forward with some type of conditional maybe approval or at least contingent approval and address that one piece. And it may be a submission of something that is acceptable on the building permit side. That may be a workable resolution. But I can tell you, if it looks bad, I may just force people to come in and get their pickup order. Because I don't, as a retailer, I also don't want to lose the forest through the trees.
And Mr. Conley, it's also
Yes.
something that the board could deny now and then later on either approve or the zoning administrator could approve, given additional information.
That's acceptable to
The
us as
walk-up
well.
window.
That's a happy medium, certainly.
Any other questions?
I just
or
got a
comment?
quick one.
Yes.
I remember when we did White Pine provisioning, when we were looking at this last time, did we give them preliminary approval if the land was bought? Ain't that the way we worked it with White Pine provisioning?
I think on the second review, though.
The second review. Okay. I was just trying to remember what happened with them.
They had to come back.
They had to come back with a better plan. Yep.
You know, the drive up or walk up window, I'm okay either way, you know, it's there, no big deal.
I think if it was on the south side, it would look better because then maybe the rest of the retailers that are on it ain't seeing the people walk up to it. So if it was on the south, it would look better.
It's not a problem for us.
More so it's for traffic flow in and out of there. You get people crossing, pedestrians. South end of the building is more than adequate.
Any other comments or questions? I personally would love to see some visuals on this, and well, I can go either direction. Is there any direction from any other planning commissioners?
Mr. Conley, do you specifically mean the walk-up window or the plan overall?
Kind of both, to be honest, at this point. I feel like there's a lot of things out there that it would be a lot simpler, for me at least, if I could see these things addressed and then brought back together in one cohesive plan. Because there are a lot of issues there with how these parking lots work together, how the traffic flow works together. And if they could all flow together nicely along with the conditions that have already been put out there and see it all as one polished package, it sure would make it a lot easier on my end.
Mr. Conley, could the record reflect that Ms. Hamill is no longer online, but she is here in person?
Oh, thank you.
So I think my only question would be, we're arm's length with the landlord. I have no privity with them. I can try to work with, I guess, their professionals to create something in conjunction as it relates to the parking lot and traffic flow. But beyond that, they really are an arm's length party to us. It's not the first time that arm's length parties have gotten together to make something. And I think certainly in a city where many of the professionals know each other, it's probably not an issue, but I just, and we'll endeavor to do that if that's what the commission wants, certainly.
I'm feeling like this is approvable, but under making sure that we have our I's dotted and our T's crossed and be able to see enough. I feel like there's a little bit of a limb to step out at the moment, personally.
Mr.
But
Conley.
other commissioners might have another opinion. Who is I should be recognizing someone, but I can't.
Mr. Hall?
I'm not sure who asked that.
Yes, if you wish, I would make a motion to table till we have further information. This is a good project, but there's a lot of unknowns on it that I think we need to address or applicant needs to provide.
I'll second that. Any further discussion?
I guess it would probably be appropriate to let applicant know whether you guys want to see all of Mr. Johnson's improvements. Is there anything in particular you want to see as part of his submissions for the next month's meeting? And probably specifically, do you want to see a walk-up window? And if so, do you want it in the place where it's at, or would you like to see it on the south side of the building?
I don't have a problem with where the walk-up window is on the south end. I think more than anything, it's the addition, the parcel to the south, that the additional building, this project and that go hand in hand. And there's just some loose ends I think need to be tied up
I get it.
for me.
I get it.
I don't have a problem with approving it, but there's too many loose ends out there that woulda, coulda, shoulda. And once we approve it, it's hard to fix it back.
Once the bell is rung, it can't be unrung.
There it
And
is.
I myself lean towards, with Mr. Hall here I don't have a problem with the walk-up window now that I more fully understand the intent. And I would keep it where it is. Viewing this in totality, we have a long building there, and this is going to be at the very end of a long building. It's not going to be prominently placed in the middle where it's easily seen. But at least it's in a more public area for security. I think it would be a bit more secure if it can be better seen rather than tucked around the outside of the building.
Mr. Conley, can I assume we want applicant to provide additional information, a picture, specs, something of the walk-up window prior to
I
next meeting?
absolutely would love that.
I don't, yeah. if
Not a
it's
problem.
available.
Make it happen.
All right, thank you.
And
Well-
and we still have to address are we, just to help the applicant, are we in agreement with the conditions that Mr. Johnson has imposed in his report? Otherwise, there's those other conditions in there as well.
Do we need to go through the conditions, Clint?
Not
Or-
necessarily, as long as nothing stood out and said, hey, wait a minute, I disagree with Mr. Johnson. If you generally agree with Mr. Johnson and you can nod on this, then we can kind of, it's not the same as a site plan approval, but we can say, well, just kind of meet what Mr. Johnson says and you'll be probably okay. It's more of a, are we in, philosophically, are we aligned with Mr. Johnson here?
I am.
I think Mr. Conley, I think the only thing I think really needs to be discussed is the parking. I believe Mr. Johnson indicated that they were losing 5 parking spaces, or they were 5 parking spaces short. So that
Mhm.
They were 5 parking spaces short, but on the JFJ site plan, they added parking back in.
It's a mute issue.
I think they can do that. And I think it's still important, in my opinion, that the fire department look at this. And they may say, I really like all those parking spaces at the end of the building to be gone so I can get my fire truck there. Rather than try to wind through that easement at 90-degree turns. Fire trucks aren't made to do that. And so all of that could change given the importance of having the fire department look at this and get their input, because a commercial building at the end doesn't deserve to be burned to the ground if the fire truck can't get there. So,
But that being said, I think most of the planning commission members would agree that our parking ordinance has often come up as requiring too many parking spaces.
yes, that's true.
So I guess I would state or ask the planning commission whether they'd like applicant to show deferred parking spaces somewhere on the site plan as an option. So instead of actually requiring applicant to put the new parking spaces in there, just to show a location where they would be put in the future if necessary.
I'd be okay with that.
It's fine with me. Okay, so the motion on the table is to table this. So any further discussion before we vote?
I just want to comment on the walk-up window. I also second that it should be on the front side and not on the south side, just for safety reasons. Having that be totally hidden, that person is a sitting duck, I think.
I don't know if it was totally hidden, but
Well, if it's on the south side, isn't it who's going to be there except for the people using that window, right?
well, there's other parking. There's a whole nother retail building that's being created. It's more for aesthetic purposes, so we don't have people lined up in front of the building. It'd be lined up on the side, but they're both.
But you wouldn't be able to see it from the roadway, which is important because we get a lot of I work for a police department, and we do get a lot of tips on things that are happening from people who are just passing by.
And is 100% valid, just didn't want to say it was completely hidden.
Totally fine. That too, but you wouldn't get, it wouldn't be
active tips coming in. It would just be, it already happened and we.
I think I'd also just want to point out, and I know we're belaboring the point, but I think somewhere in the application, it said that the windows would be mirrored.
The windows that are there currently are mirrored except for one, so you can't see in.
So I think under the ordinance, we only allow 75% of the mirror, the window to be mirrored. So you'd have to slice and dice a little bit.
What we did in Big Rapids.
With
Okay.
that, I shut up.
Call for the question.
All in favor of tabling this to the next meeting, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion is tabled. We'll hope to be able to bring this up and finish it up the next time around. Okay, which brings us to the last item of new business tonight. And that is item C under 10 new business, site plan review and special land use for Rockford Ambulance located at 141222 White Creek, Cedar Springs.
Yes.
And once again, I'll put you on the stage, Mr. Johnson, if you're ready to do so. Or when you are ready to do so.
I am ready. This project is a special land use and site plan for an ambulance service establishment. It's my understanding, although I was not here at the time, that this was approved back in 2016. The site plan expired because, and the special use did as well, because it was not enacted within a year of approval. So the applicant has submitted a site plan and a special use permit application to construct a 2,173 square foot building and related parking areas at 14122 White Creek Avenue, which is directly across from the White Creek Plaza. The site plan also shows a second future building and drives, but that project is not being requested for approval at this time and would be exempt from any approval, and they would have to come back for approval for that project in the future. Under site plan comments, the site plan is dated 5/03/21. It's very well prepared. It meets most of the requirements of the ordinance, except as follows, and that would be on the landscaping plan that they've given us. It exceeds what our current ordinance today requires. The ordinance has been changed from what we had in 2016, whereas we had required one tree per 10 feet of frontage. Now it's one tree for every 50 feet. So the applicant is certainly free to put in all the trees shown on the site plan, or they may revise it and show us a new plan in accordance with today's regulations. One of the other major points has to do with the driveways. And again, we've updated our ordinance since this plan was first approved in 2016. The proposed driveway is required to align with driveways across the street or be offset by 150 feet. The Rockford driveway is offset by only 90 feet, but there's two driveways across the street. And while the driveway for Rockford Ambulance could line up with one of the driveways, but it would not meet the offset from the other driveway. So fortunately, being the good planners that we are, we put into our ordinance at the time a couple of years ago that we can modify these driveway standards according to the items that I put in my report and are taken from our zoning ordinance. And in looking at those, I would say that items A, B, E, and H would come into play here. And the proposed driveway would meet those standards and would meet the criteria. And if it's subject to the Kent County Road Commission approval as well, I believe the Planning Commission could approve this based on meeting those standards and being subject to the Kent County Road Commission driveway permit. One other thing that I don't know if it was taken care of back in 2016, but I think the ordinance was in effect at that time. And that is that a sidewalk would have to be installed, or variance would have to be, a waiver, I guess, would have to be granted by the city council. So unless somebody produces evidence that they got that waiver back in 2016, they would have to seek it under today's standards. Lighting plan, they have very low lighting, but I think they need to give us that lighting plan subject to approval by the zoning administrator as usual. The facade is, I think, does meet our facade regulations. And our engineer has recommended conditional approval in a separate report provided to you. Under the special land use comments, it is my opinion, as expressed in my report, that they do meet those standards. And I believe the project fits very well on the site. It will add very little traffic to 17 Mile Road. And based on your finding that it meets the criteria of our access management standards, I believe this project could be approved, subject to the conditions I put in my report. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Womack, did you have anything to add?
Not really. It's a very well done plan, but I agree there's some minor modifications purely based on the law changes that have occurred over the last couple of years. So it's probably approvable tonight, subject to submission of a final update that meets all the requirements Mr. Johnson has listed.
Planning Commission, any questions or comments from you?
May I ask a question?
Certainly, Mr. Nixon.
Mr. Johnson, because this is not a retail site, do we not need to have them provide a preliminary or a hookup to the retail site to the side of them or to the north of them?
Cross access.
The driveway, that is an option. I skipped over that in my report, but it is in there. That is one of the options that you could allow this driveway to go in on a temporary basis, but then require that when the project to the north develops and comes in for site plan review, that the driveway that you would approve today would be shifted to the north and straddle the common lot line so they could have a shared driveway. So that is an option.
What I was talking about was like from Advance to like the farm store where you have access to the next property to the north of you.
Well,
but it's not a retail, so we don't really need anybody going between the two properties, right?
Whether it's retail or not, access, connected access is always very important when you're trying to keep other traffic off the road. But I looked at that. It doesn't really, on the farm implement store to the north, Tractor Supply, there's not a good landing spot to connect to there. And
Well, that's south, and north is,
Well,
Yeah, there's a little
Was it-
office building there.
There's the little hair.
north is like that MJ Dalton or whatever.
yeah, to the north, that is feasible. And given that that's an existing house that's converted to retail, the likelihood that will convert to something where you need a site plan that could happen. And at that point in time, you could require that a Rockford ambulance share that driveway, but you'd have to put that requirement into place today.
Mr. Chair, on Mr. Johnson, on the site plan, it shows that there's an existing wetlands where that cross-access road would go. That could be problematic for the developer.
Right, the size of that wetland isn't very big and may not be connected to another body of water. It may not be subject to the Wetland Protection Act.
That's unknown. I just see it on their wetlands.
Yeah, it would take a little more money and a bigger bulldozer to make that happen, though.
They have to make remediation somewhere else on the site for it.
If it was subject to regulation, yes. Yeah.
Mr. Johnson, is there any reason that the planning commission can't simply today say applicant shall connect to the parking lot to the north if the north part property gets developed at a future date? Just make it part of the site plan approval today.
Yeah, it's like, do you want the ambulance having to share their driveway with a retail space? I wouldn't want the ambulance sharing a driveway with a retail space. They should have.
Yeah, you're reading my mind on that one too.
Yeah, I'm in the same place.
First thing that came to my mind about a shared thing is somebody's going to go through there, and if you got an emergency, we don't need more traffic going through there.
Yeah, I would have, yeah.
Minimal traffic of theirs alone. With what I
Yeah,
see
and
here.
that's just fine. I just wanted to make sure with Mr. Johnson that we were doing everything that we needed to do on that.
Well, you always have the option to make that requirement, but you don't have to. I think it meets the standards and the criteria to allow you to approve this. as well. But you could go either way. But from what you've just said, you've made a good point that you wouldn't want, when the ambulance has to go, it has to go. And if there's some other car sitting there from a retail use to the north, that's blocking it, that would not be a good situation.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would make a motion to approve this in condition to Mr. Johnson's recommendations.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Mr.
Anything else
Conley,
we need to address before we move on with that?
to clarify, Mr. Hall's motion, you mean the requirements that are listed in Mr. Johnson's report?
Correct.
Mr. Johnson, is that an okay motion? I'm not familiar with.
I didn't see your motion in our,
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to approve it verbatim, then yeah, that's fine.
Are there any options that need to be addressed in there?
Approval of the annexation would be required. They have to go to city council to get the sidewalk waiver. I think there's a very couple of minor site plan corrections they would have to bring back to the zoning administrator, but otherwise it's acceptable.
Clint,
Yes.
do we need to make with that motion that the site plan is approvable as long as it goes back through the zoning administrator?
It's on there. That's condition number 9.
Yeah.
9.
Okay,
And
double
then the-
checking. Thank you.
And
The
then number
facade-
8,
Yeah, number
Yeah.
8, yes.
Okay, so we're going with all that. Okay, thank you.
well, I need to clarify with Mr. Hall. There was a conditional aspect of number 8. Is the facade acceptable or not acceptable?
That's acceptable.
Do we need to revise the motion for that?
I believe Mr. Hall just did revise the motion.
It's acceptable. I'd revise it to that.
Okay, so do we need to resecond it?
I'll resecond that.
Thank you. So then again, with discussion, I want to clarify on the driveway relocation requirements. Is that saying that we are allowing the driveway where it is and that we are using the justification that Mr. Johnson provided? I'm trying to find where he did that as to the conditions.
Condition 6.
It is in 6, and it's the 3 points that he recommended that made the driveway fit where it is correct on the print.
Okay. There was because there was a. All right, never mind. Good enough. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor? Please signify with aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Who all was on the
Um,
planning commission when we approved this last time?
Leave you.
Think, oh boy, that dates me. I know there was a lot of discussion on this site plan back when it was first approved. And then for whatever reason, they opted out from providing that out there, but it was always a wanted addition to the town. And the site plan shows a future building, and that was a bone of contention on the site plan that would be additional storage, and I think there was an issue with that, but the ambulance itself is a very welcome thing we need in this community.
Mr. Conley, were you on the board at that time?
I was, and I was about to echo what Mr. Hall said. And that I am happy that we finally are going to move forward with that. I was bitterly disappointed. I'm joking, but when we didn't actually see it come in before, but I'm glad it's coming in now.
Well, I'm coming of age where I may need their facility, so.
That's true. We can make a special parking spot just for you, Mr. Hall.
Yeah, me too.
I pay every year for them to pick me up, so. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. So we are moving on, and I'm giddy with the idea that we could possibly actually be done by 9 tonight. So the next thing on the agenda was correspondence. Is there any correspondence, Mr. Womack or Ms. Johnson? I'm not sure.
None that I'm aware of. Ms. Johnson is nodding her head no.
Okay. Staff comments, city manager. I'll throw it back to you, Mr. Womack.
I love how pro-development this board has gotten, and the discussion has been great with all of you. The only thing I'd comment is that the week before your meeting, I spent a lot of my time putting your agenda together. The week after your meeting, I put a lot of time together reviewing and approving of the plans that have been bounced back to me as zoning administrator. So I appreciate you guys taking up 2 weeks of my month.
Okay.
Pleasure.
You're welcome.
Good job.
I could comment on. Complete package.
All right, the city clerk, any comments?
She says, no, thank you.
Thank you. Planning commission, any comments from the planning commission? Okay, well, I will say, I'll just take my time to say thank you for coming tonight. And thank you for helping us move through this so quickly tonight. I thought we would be here till 11. And city council representative.
Yeah,
That's still
thank
you, Mr. Hall, I think.
Oh, boy, I talked a lot tonight, you know, in some of these things, these businesses coming to town and I've already said this in the past, my pet peeve is not complete packets. And, you know, in turn, that causes a lot of additional work for Mr. Womack's in his daily duty. If we have a complete packet when it comes to us, there's not this hour debate on this particular item, whether they do or they don't, or where this goes, we know. So that's one thing I would like to see more is a complete packets, but you know, thank you all for being here. And some of these discussions are very good. And that's what we need is good discussion to come up with good answers for the problems that we have here in town. And thank you all for your time.
Mr. Hall, if I could address that for just half a second.
No.
I do know that there is at least one council member who is thinking about adopting a policy at the council level, which would require any special land use or maybe any marijuana business to go through the Mr. Johnson process first before coming onto your agenda.
Oh, wonderful.
So I suspect that's something that's going to be brought up at the city council meeting next week.
That'd be great.
That just streamlines the process of this planning commission. Instead of having to debate every little item on the site plan, it's done when it comes here. And it meets our ordinances and it's a streamline for both parties.
It'd go a lot faster.
Yes,
A
and I
lot easier.
understand a lot of these companies are trying to get their toehold into our town, so they're trying to push this through, but
Yeah, it's a race.
ultimately it costs us a lot of time and the management and the city staff to take care of this stuff. Where if it's complete, it's a quick, painless process for all. Thank you. I've said enough.
The planning consultant, do you have a report for us, Mr. Johnson?
Well, I've actually said more than Mr. Hall has tonight, but
You get paid.
that's why I'm here. But no, it's good to be here and good to be seen and to see some of you. And
Yes.
you are not alone in terms of other municipalities I work with. Nobody gets site plans that come in without a whole bunch of things wrong with them. You know, that's just the way it is. And everybody's in a hurry today. And it just means that you hurry up and wait is what it means. But I think it would be a good way to streamline the process for, and I know Mike meets with these applicants beforehand, but sometimes they just don't get it. Or they don't hire good help or good professionals to prepare their plan. So I think that's a good policy to put into place.
Okay, thank you. And with that, then we're adjourned. Thank you.
If everyone can make sure to appear in person at their July meeting. The June meetings were the last meetings that could be held virtually.
Correct.
Unless you have a health reason for appearing virtually. And I'm not going to ask what your health reason is, but otherwise we expect to see you here at City Hall on July something.
July something, the first Tuesday of July.
Possibly, unless it's 4th of July, which.
That's true. Yeah.
Thank you.